well, one of the big concerns that we've been seeing now for passengers looking to come back to India, in some cases for passengers looking to leave India as well, are extraordinary flight fares. And this is coming at a time when so many Indians look to return to the country. That's number one. Number two, there appears to be a great deal of confusion at the moment about quarantine regulations, RT-PCR regulations, particularly for those Indians and others who are coming into our country from at-risk nations. So that's the United Kingdom, several European nations, and a handful of other nations as well. What happens to flights from abroad? What happens to tourism in our country? How are we going to be handling passengers who actually come in? And how is this huge fare battle actually affecting us? We have a wonderful guest. Rajesh Magow, co-founder and group CEO of MakeMyTrip, joins us. Thanks very much, Mr. Magow, for being with us. Before I ask you my first question, I was doing a bit of a search on MakeMyTrip, random searches for Singapore to Delhi, London to Delhi, and a few other routes. Let's have a graphic up and then get your views. So let's have the first graphic up on some of the fares that we've actually been seeing. The first one actually pertains to flights between London and Delhi. And what we've done is, do we have that? Can we have that up? The first one is London to Delhi, and this is going to be non-stop and one-stop flights. So we just took 4 dates, random dates. These are one-way flights. On the 6th of December, the cheapest flight is 1.5 lakhs, 13th of December 1.12, 20th of December 1.5, then it comes down to 90,000. A one-stop flight, 73,000 rupees, 98,000 rupees, London to Delhi, 90,000 rupees on the 20th of December, and then 51,000 rupees. Remember, these are all one-way flights. Non-stop from New York, 1.7, 1.6, 1.4, 91,000. A one-stop is offered at 1.5, 86,000, 1.17, and 76,000. Towards the end of the month, it's coming down. The key point is these are all one-way fares. It's unbelievable, these prices. Why is it happening?
Yeah, and hi Vishnu, thanks for having me. My pleasure. The root cause of this, Vishnu, is the demand and supply gap. Right now the number of flights that are there open in the system, at least till some time back, and now like you rightly pointed out, there's huge amount of confusion now because of the recent announcements and all, and we can talk about that. But the reality is that the number of flights sort of operating in all these long haul routes as compared to what it used to be in steady state pre-pandemic are lot lower. And even if there was not like a lot of the huge demand from, let's say, leisure segment for these long haul sectors, the demand from the segments that were allowed with some restrictions, with no restrictions, etc., which is like student segment, people going back to their home countries and so on, that itself is pretty big. So, so if there's going to be high demand and there are low number of flights, then the fares are bound to go high. In fact, if you really see in your graph itself, as you were going surprisingly closer to New Year dates, the fares are coming down. And that my suspicion right now is, and that has happened more because of the recent announcements. Otherwise, closer to the New Year, they are actually even more expensive. Because see, right now, the crowd, as you were alluding to, the crowd which is sort of coming back to the country is going to a lot of the students who actually went back to study in the US and the or UK or Europe. In the month of August, they are going to come back after the semester is over, right in the middle of December or later for a break for a month and a half, and then the crowd goes back again end of January. So that's like huge amount of people that come back, and that there's demand on that segment. And then there is, a visiting friends, relatives sort of segment demand as well. So, what has happened just about few days ago, just before the recent announcement because of the new variant, as the announcement, if you would recall, that had come that the scheduled flights are going to get operated, and now that's likely to change. From 15 December, more and more flights were there in the system.
Right.
So the moment you have more flights in the system, within a day, we saw fares coming down. So, it's just fundamentally, it's a function of, too less flights and too many people wanting to travel right now.
Just so that I understand, normally in the month of December, when in a pre-COVID world, which seems a far world away, what were one-way fares for a London-Delhi flight?
Well, you'll be surprised.
About 50,000 rupees?
Yeah,
which is inflated.
I would say about $1,500 round trip. And depending upon US, Canada, long haul flights that you talk about, depending upon the seasonality. So around the Christmas, it'll be about $1,500, and before that, if you see and you do an advance purchase, you would be around $1,100, $1,200 as well. So that used to be the steady state. Now, obviously, these are not normal circumstances, to be honest. This is essentially air bubble arrangements, very few flights that are operating. And from an airline standpoint, in all fairness, there was a time when there was demand on one segment, but return there was less demand because the inbound flights into India were not allowed. Inbound traffic beyond, few segments, it wasn't really allowed. There was a huge amount of restrictions there. So there are a lot of variables at play here. And therefore, unfortunately, right now, I think we should be lucky if we are able to get the seat. At whatever fare that you're able to get it.
In fact, I just want to clarify for our viewers that what you're actually seeing this chart, these are one-way fares, which makes it absolutely bizarre. If you were to shop around for a business class fare at 1.6, 1.7 lakhs, if you were lucky, you could actually pick up a return business class fare to parts of Europe from India. But these are economy class fares, so that gives you an idea of how much it's been marked up. The other thing I wanted to ask you, RT-PCR tests are now compulsory for those people coming in from at-risk nations. Are there likely to be cancellations?
No, I think there would be some for sure because right now what we've seen in the last couple of days is more sentiment driven. The data, as we all know, is not there, or whatever data that is coming out of South Africa seems to suggest that the variant could be mild in nature. It may not be severe, but it has to sink in. So a lot of the experts have to come up with the more data and all. But the fact that it is more infectious potentially, we've seen sort of sentiment driven in one direction. I think time will only tell. So the last, we saw, say, about 12% sort of drop, which was completely sentiment driven, typically like it will happen in the stock market as well, as we know. But in the coming days and weeks, we will get to know more, Vishnu. I mean, right now we haven't really seen, if I compare it with the previous lockdown situations where we used to be flooded with the cancellation calls, etc. It's not the case right now. And I think one of the reasons for that, or maybe two reasons for that also is that one, that overall, at least when you look at the daily infection numbers in India are under control, in the last 10 days. In fact, that's much better news right now, especially, when we were all sort of fearing that post-festivities, that the surge should not happen. So I think we've crossed that sort of hump, but this new thing came from nowhere.
What about domestic flights? Is that also a cause of concern? That I'm told you need to fill in your online forms if you travel, for example, to Chennai. That's number one. Number two, RT-PCR testing 72 hours before you head to Bombay. Is that going to impact the sector?
I think it's the Maharashtra announcement, which is definitely going to add more friction. And if you really sort of compare it with other, in fact, today morning there was huge amount of chaos because it got announced last night, and from today. At least for one segment where you're not vaccinated or you had only one dose, you were not really aware, and we were all sort of struggling to find more info and all of that. So today, the chaos is getting managed by, airlines taking a relaxed view, but it obviously created chaos. In my personal view, I don't think that was probably needed given the circumstances. I think it might be, being a little bit more extra careful or getting more paranoid about it. But it definitely adds to friction. I think if we would have gone down the path of saying doubly vaccinated people traveling domestically, given there is no situation in domestic right now, there's not even one case, and hopefully, we would not have that kind of surge. Till then, I'm not sure that was, sort of called for.
Right.
It does create utter amount of confusion in people's mind and panic.
Sure.
And in many other states haven't really done this.
One final question to you, Mr. Magow, is this. The tourism sector, tourism was coming back into India, both within the country and outside. But now, even all across the country, you clear your RT-PCR test in the airport, you still quarantine for 7 days. Maharashtra different. We'll see what happens there eventually. But across the country, 7 days, right, at home. That means you're stuck. You can't travel. So if you're a tourist coming into India or somebody else coming into India, it really affects your plans.
No, it does. We should say, if you really have to see it in perspective, international travel in any case had not recovered. Now, whether it was inbound or outbound, and we were hoping that from 15 December, there will be some meaningful international travel recovery that will start to happen. It was just about 15-20%, while domestic had come back to 80-85%. I think the way I see it is sort of going to fall back into domestic travel. And domestic travel, if we are able to control with these restrictions, notwithstanding the chaos that is there right now, it settles down. And if we are able to control with extra precautions, etc., it might be good that we will be able to salvage the domestic travel, relatively less friction, with less friction. So that should help definitely the tourism industry.
Sure.
We were all looking for international travel to come back, but, it seems like it's going to be, some more weight on that front.
All right. Well, great speaking to you. Thanks so much for joining us. These are testing times indeed, but bottom line is we need to be safe. But what's a smart way of ensuring that people are safe? I think that's what Rajesh and I have been speaking about. Thank you so much for being with us. Thanks so much.
Right. Thanks a lot. Bye.